It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Well, my friends, thanks for joining us today. I want to start off the show and tell you that this show is going to be very interesting. We're going to be talking about a lot of facts. Most importantly, there'll be a lot of graphic scenes that you'll be seeing during the show. So I'm going to ask you, if you have any young children that are watching the show, please you supervise them accordingly. And the thing I'd like to get across today is information only. Our guests that are on the Sam Lesante Show today are not pointing fingers at anyone. We just want to give you information that I think is extremely important in our world today. My guest, we're going to be talking about pro-life. Yes, Sam Lesante's back at it again, but this time we're going to talk about what you don't maybe know about abortion, and for you to reconsider what your moral values are. Dr. Frank Polidora will be talking about the medical part of abortion. Maryann Lawhon will be talking about women's health care. And Father Peter O'Rourke will be talking about the moral values. Frank, nice to see you.
Nice seeing you too.
Let's get right to it. Let's talk about the medical part of abortion and what it is. And as you're talking, we're going to show actually aborted children. What happens?
All right. Well, first, people have to realize that abortion is the major cause of death in the world, human death, and in the United States. Just to give you, 62 million babies have been aborted in our country since 1973, and 1.58 billion babies in the world. But it's even more than that because this doesn't include through medical means of abortion. In Pennsylvania, there are about 30,000 abortions a year, and in Luzerne County, actually, about 500 women had abortions. They weren't done in Luzerne County; they were done elsewhere. The county with the least number of abortions, people having them elsewhere, is Sullivan. They only had 2. Philadelphia is responsible for performing 40% of the abortions. Most of these abortions are done early in the pregnancy, with maybe 62% being done earlier as 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever, probably a little more than that. The late-term abortions in Pennsylvania are about 1.5%. The law in Pennsylvania is that you can't have an abortion if the woman is 24 weeks or greater. But that didn't stop Kermit Gosnell in Pennsylvania, where he aborted a baby that was probably, that they recognized it was 30 weeks gestation. Abortion is the greatest, as I mentioned, it's the greatest cause of human death in the world. But what is it? Its best way to describe it is it's mechanized killing. It's the removal of an unborn baby from what should be the safest place in America, his or her mother's womb, and in a most horrific way. It also gets rid of a unique individual. The baby, it becomes unique at conception. And actually, if you think about conception, it's very interesting how special this is. I don't know if you realize it, but in a woman's cycle, there's only 6 days when she can conceive, yet we have so many people in the world. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, if you think about it, most of that cycle is developed to preparing her womb for a child. All right, very interesting. And actually, as I mentioned, at conception, the individual becomes unique. It makes me think of something in the Bible, and the two shall become one. The mother and the father contribute to this unique individual. People have heard these terms like zygote is early on in this conception, and then it becomes the embryo until 8 weeks of gestation, and then it becomes the fetus until the baby is born. But people have to realize these are, I call them adjectival nouns. They are not specific species. This is a human being that goes through these developments, just like you'd say a toddler, a boy, a youth, a man, an older man, a senior. Another thing people have to realize is that these babies that are being aborted feel pain. They feel horrible pain, and especially at 20 weeks. everything's been set up that they can feel pain, but the inhibitory aspect of pain is not there. You know, if you feel pain, if you're doing something else, you may not notice it, but they don't have that. The other thing is the time issue. You know, when you're younger, time goes by slowly. Think how slowly it goes by for these young ones that are being aborted and what's being done to them. The things that are being done are horrible. You know, the way these babies are killed involves everything from starving them, burning them with chemicals, cutting them to pieces, tearing them to pieces, and actually some people use this for selective harvesting, okay? There's a lot of ways to do this. Early on, they use these abortion pills, the RU-486, which they starve and then expel the baby, but it may take a long time for that to occur. The early ones are suction aspiration, where a sharp instrument with a suction is used to basically suck the baby into pieces. And then you have, later on, they call it dilation and evacuation, where forceps are used to grab the baby and literally pull the baby limb from limb. It's like what happened to William Wallace in Braveheart. It's a horrible way to die. And this is when also they use this to harvest specific parts of the baby for experimental or other purposes. There's also been chemicals that have been distilled, as I mentioned, and I guess the ones that are done now, but not that commonly anymore, thank goodness, are hypertonic saline, which is 20% saline. If you think about your blood is like 1%, equivalent to 1% saline, it's 0.9%. And it burns the baby, and then the baby has to be expelled. And that may take 72 hours for the mother. And they can get complications with all these things, everything from retained baby parts and placenta to infection and bleeding and lacerations and that sort of thing. One of the most hideous ones is partial birth abortion, which I thought was going to be dead, but it's not. Look at New York, where they're having babies aborted up until the time of birth. That's where the baby is partially delivered, and with the head still inside the mother's womb. Scissors are thrust into the back of the baby's neck. A suction tube is put in, and the baby's brains are sucked out, and it guarantees a dead baby, which is what an abortionist wants. We have, you know, as a physician, it boggles my mind that there are people that can actually do this. What I find interesting, most abortionists are men. Obviously, all the patients are women. Anyway, that's a summary of what's going on in the world with abortion.
We live in we live in a civilized world, don't we, Frank?
They talk about the veneer of civilization, which is very thin.
And this is what's going on today. And the coronavirus, the China virus is important. There's no question about it. But yet every day there's thousands of babies being aborted. As we're showing them, folks, they're not made up pictures. They're actually pictures. Pro-life people want to end that. They want to stop that. Pro-life people want to end the abortions. Okay. Right. Pro-choice people want this to continue on. It's as simple as that. Touchy subject. When Father O'Rourke comes on, we'll talk about the moral part, but we always hear about women's health care. Coming up next will be Maryann Lawhon, and she will talk about women's health care and Planned Parenthood family planning programs. We'll be back after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Today's show is informing the public, giving as many facts as we can about abortion. This is a critical election, and I would like to just inform people of what is out there. I'm not telling anyone how to vote, what to do, but you use your own conscience. We had Dr. Polidora on, first part of the show, talking about the medical part, and we showed graphic pictures of actually people who were young unborn babies that were torn apart, ripped apart, and continuing. We often hear about family planning, about women's rights, etc., and this is what pro-choice people tell you all the time. It's my body, I'll do what I want to. Maryann Lawhon is the president of Pennsylvanians for Human Life and director of the Voice for John. Maryann, we hear this all the time about, you know, women's, liberal women who want to decide what they should do with their bodies. And it's the pro-choice. Planned Parenthood is for family planning, etc.
Well, that's a huge misconception, because actually during this pandemic, Planned Parenthood remained open for only one type of service, and that was abortion. So what, can you really tell me that killing your child is an essential service, while the other relevant healthcare services that they propose, that they provide to us, all of that was not so essential during the pandemic? No. Planned Parenthood, and you know, this is an election that is unprecedented. I have been voting for decades, and I have never voted in an election that will determine our future. And it's the most critical election. And as a woman, as somebody who has been a proponent of women's rights, what I say to you, when you're going to this election and you're looking at one party and who will support my tax dollars, the hard-earned money I earned paying for an abortion, that will support unlimited abortions, dismembering children, arm by arm, leg by leg, pulling out an intact torso if you can, so that you can probably sell the body parts. And there's actually a menu of how much you can get for an intact liver, spleen, etc. This is using women and their fears and financial, maybe a state of financial, you know, during this pandemic, women have lost their jobs, or their husbands have lost their jobs. What brings women to an abortion clinic? Fear, absolute fear, rejection, a husband or significant other who will not stand by them. We as women, our obligation is to empower one another. And you know, we have, in this election, we have one party who is saying unlimited abortions till birthday and beyond. And we have another party that opposes that. Brutal dismemberment abortion, and trust me, it is brutal to see dismemberment, as Dr. Polidora said. And that one party, our Democrat Party, they will support dismemberment abortion, and the Republican Party opposes it. So this election transcends political party or even the candidate. You've got to look at these issues. Women, they may, Hollywood is telling you, celebrate it, shout it out, but they suffer from the wound of abortion for the rest of their life. They cut themselves, they're depressed, they find themselves in unstable relationships. This is a woman's issue indeed. And we have, you know, I just want to mention one candidate, and good for Luzerne County. Both Tara and Todd are running pro-life, but Tara has done so much in adoption, and that's the alternative. Empower a woman, stand by her, and then give her that adoption option. And what Tara has done in her legislation to oppose dismemberment abortion, to the pain, the children who can feel this pain, to stop these late-term abortions. So we need to look at each candidate, where they stand on these vital issues. And the other thing I want to talk about, Sam, is racism. And I hear the Republican Party dubbed misogynistic or racist, and they are not. When I look at the number of abortions that are done in our country, the vast majority are on African American children. We are killing off the African American children. And during these proceedings, for our nominee for Supreme Court Justice, our religious freedom, by the way, it looks like it's very much under attack. Her Catholic belief. Will she be able to be a Supreme Court Justice and a Catholic? I think we all need to take note of that. But beyond that, I heard it argued, and the African American women will not have access to abortion if Roe versus Wade is overturned. And we need to look at what society would look like without Roe versus Wade. But all women will have less access to abortion, I pray, if we overturn Roe versus Wade and the decision goes back to the state. But again, why was that targeted during the Supreme Court nomination proceedings? I think we really have to look at that and say that Planned Parenthood, whose founder was clearly racist, who talked about eliminating the Negro population, weeding them out. So we have to look at that. And you know, in conclusion, I want to talk about something that happened to me as I walked out of Mass this past Sunday. I walked out of my church and was greeted by a woman in the parking lot who said, "Are you Maryann Lawhon?" I said, yes, I am. And she said, "You're the voice of John." And I thanked her for that. And she then said, and I just received Holy Communion, and you know how we have to walk out now. But she said to me, "Well, who are you going to vote for in this election?" Which took me off guard. And I said, "Well, I'll be voting for President Trump. I will vote for life. I will vote a platform." And she said, "I'm not." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because I can't stand his face." And I said, "You know what I can't stand is the face of a child who is left to die on a dirty utility room counter. This was infanticide. That's the face that will haunt me." And so we really have to realize that this election, yes, there are the non-negotiables and the negotiables. We can negotiate the border and the China deals and the economy and so forth. But life, human life in the womb is a non-negotiable. And so we have to look at this as, yes, I look at it from a racist and a sexist and above all, a human life election.
We live in a civilized society, and when we see these pictures, and they will continue on, okay, and again, you know, you have to talk about conscience, and here's a person that, etc. Go ahead.
Can I just say this? I read this from 2 Chronicles. "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and will heal their land." The face of God is in the face of this baby. We are standing at the edge of an abyss right now. And when you pull that lever, when you decide how you'll vote, will you step into the abyss or will you walk towards the face of God?
We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the Sam Lesante Show, folks. Today we're talking about the facts on the abortion. Once again, we're not here pointing fingers, but we want you to understand that we're coming to a critical day, November 3rd. Now, Father Peter O'Rourke's here to talk about the moral factor here. Father, thanks for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Sam. You know, I want to speak, you know, to everybody about my own Catholic faith and the teachings of the Church. And I've been really frustrated over the campaign that has been going on, you know, both parties, but especially the one campaign slogan that really gets to me, where one of the candidates says, "If I were president, I would follow the science." Yes, 220,000 deaths linked to the coronavirus over the past 10 months. That's 2,200 a month. But compare that to the 60 million plus deaths over the past 47 years linked to procured abortion, approximately 1.3 million a year. That's 108,333 deaths by abortion a month in the United States. Here's a startling fact. Human life begins at conception. That's a scientific fact. And one political party promotes the killing of human life within the womb up to the 9th month, and now even beyond. To those elected officials who claim their Catholicism, but whose voting records consistently diametrically oppose the Church's clear teaching on human life issues, I respectfully offer the following. No rights are safe when the right of life is not. Archbishop Charles J. Capu. From the Catechism of the Catholic Church, 2268, the fifth commandment forbids direct and intentional killing as gravely sinful. The murderer and those who cooperate voluntarily commits a sin that cries out to heaven for vengeance. Infanticide, fratricide, parricide, and the murder of a spouse are especially grave crimes by reason of the natural bonds which they break. Concern for eugenics or public health cannot justify any murder, even if commanded by public authority. From the Catechism of the Catholic Church again, 2270, human life must be respected and protected absolutely from the moment of conception. It goes on to say, from the first moment of his existence, a human being must be recognized as having the rights of a person, among which is the inviolable right of every human being to life. From the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith, Donum Vitae 1:1, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. From the Didache, the earliest extant teaching of the 12 apostles, you shall not kill the embryo by abortion and shall not cause the newborn to perish. If there is any moral teaching of the Catholic Church that is absolute, it is the teaching on the immorality of abortion, which has been condemned with remarkable consistency in every age of the Church. No bishop or teacher has ever taught that direct abortion is morally permissible, and the condemnation of abortion is remarkably consistent. Unfortunately, there is a minority within the Church who attempt to relativize the preeminent priority of abortion with all other issues, such as climate change and health care. The Second Vatican Council, Gaudium et Spes 51, calls abortion an unspeakable crime. This is what it teaches. God, the author of life, has entrusted to men the noble mission of safeguarding life, and men must carry it in a manner worthy of themselves. Life must be protected with the utmost care from the moment of conception. Abortion and infanticide are abominable crimes. From the canon law of the Catholic Church, Canon 22, when civil law is canonized, it binds all persons in the Church. However, there are two restrictions. First, if the effect of civil law is against divine law, it remains ineffective in canon law. And secondly, if canon law makes an explicit reservation at some point, it must prevail over civil law. Here's an example. A contract to perform an abortion, even if valid civilly, is null and void canonically. Canon 1398, this is important. A person who procures a completed abortion incurs an automatic latae sentiate excommunication. In recent years, it has become ever more precarious for institutions like the Catholic Church to teach some of the traditional ethics that it has taught and adhered to for thousands of years. In my opinion, because we do not firmly teach the extrinsic evil of abortion, euthanasia, and assisted suicide, I believe the Church has regressed to a don't ask, don't tell, out of sight, out of mind situation, indifferent to canon law and to the deposit of the faith. St. Pope John Paul II, fully aware of Canon 1398, writes in his encyclical Evangelium Vitae, Article 62, the Church's canonical discipline from the earliest centuries has inflicted penal sanctions on those guilty of abortion. This practice has been confirmed in various periods of history. The 1970 Code of Canon Law published abortion with excommunication. The revised canonical legislation continues this tradition when it decrees that a person who actually procures an abortion incurs automatic excommunication. It goes on to say the excommunication affects all those who commit this crime with knowledge of the penalty attached, and thus includes those accomplices without whose help this crime would not have been committed, encouraging those who commit it to seek without delay the path of conversion. After 47 years of legalized abortion, no Catholic should be ignorant of Canon 1398 or of God's mercy, which brings one back to the light of God's truth. We live in a culture of moral relativism, which promotes subjective over objective truth. Relativism makes it easy for those in authority to manipulate others. Relativism destroys faith. Catholic politicians who consistently vote to fund organizations like Planned Parenthood and other worldwide organizations who proliferate these atrocities act as necessary cooperators as defined by Canon 1398 and subject to the penalties afforded to their actions. Yes, in 2016, the Jubilee Year of Mercy, Pope Francis decreed that any priest may hear the confession of anyone involved in an abortion. And on November 20th, the same year, by means of apostolic letter, he extended this provision beyond the Jubilee year. The Church has always considered excommunication an exercise of God's mercy. The opportunity to acknowledge the gravity of a sin, confess it, and by the grace of God foster a profound conversion of heart and repentance. Yes, God forgives, healing all our pain and sinfulness, saves us from an empty life, covers us with gentleness and love, but one most humbly confess the sin and ask for absolution, which requires a change of heart. All that is necessary for evil to prevail is for good men to do nothing. Relativism produces a society of do-nothings in the face of moral evils.
We have Catholics, we have some priests, we have some bishops, we have Eucharistic ministers, we have Knights of Columbus, who will support a platform they will vote for a platform that will continue on with abortions. What do you say to them very quickly?
I say this, with the clear teaching of the Catholic Church, even for us who put it out of mind, you know, and just kind of push it to the side, we actually become complicit, you know, to the act of abortion and to the killing of unborn children.
When you go to vote, please look and see who's for keeping the abortion, and please look who's for stopping the atrocities that you've seen on the show. We'll see you next time.